So today's our session is going to be based on watercolors and ink technique, and I'd love to suggest you to use a little wooden wedge with the inks. Maybe the ink you can put your you can dip in your stick in. If you don't have a wooden wedge, maybe a piece of back an old brush or an old twig, any twig you might find, that would be good. And I'm going to use as well a squirrel brush at some point, maybe a flat brush. Get the flat brush just to test some colors.
Yeah, well,
Okay. And I will also, the technique today will be based on how we can apply some of the colors, some of the orangey, browny colors, any other colors we want to use, and create an image without filling all the gaps in, without filling all the spaces and painting it as we'd normally do. Before we'll start getting our heads around it, let's just find some of the colors we might be interested. So I'm going to put some of the oranges maybe on my paper just to test things out. Might just put a couple of different oranges if you have them. If not, maybe just mix the yellow and red together. I'm going to find any other paler brown. So this is a lovely red brown. All I'm interested in is just to get some varieties of kind of those autumny colors, some sort of settled tones.
Select a microphone. What's that?
don't know.
Same as system.
Okay, the guys can't hear me, I think. There. And I'm gonna put maybe a little bit of red just to see if I were to mix it with one of my browns. Any other browns I have, maybe siennas or sepias. Okay, so today it will be up to you what colors, browns, oranges, reds you might want to use. We're gonna find maybe one of the bit more greeny brown type of color. Okay. And then in our warm-up sketch, I have a tiny bit of blue. So maybe I can go for one of my blues, let's say, or cobalt blue or azure, any of your blues, or ultramarine. Okay, it's a bit more stronger. So something like that. So for example, I can use it maybe for part of my sky here. I'm just trying to find some of those links of blue where else it might be on my work. And I think for the actual painting, I'm probably going to go for some bolder, brighter green. So I'll go for light green and some yellows. So range of browns, oranges, and then maybe a color of your choice for blue or green or any other colors you might want to add. Okay. So now I'm going to use, without doing anything else, any drawings or anything, I'm just going to put a couple of patterns of color. So maybe something cool at the top, maybe orangey browny, maybe a little bit of blue, and work into little shapes of patterns of browns. So for example, I've got, and it doesn't have to be any specific color. So for example, I'm going to put a little bit of brown on the top. I'm going to go for a little bit more orangey brown somewhere here. Yeah, just letting it run, just letting it merge, making it quite soft. Okay. It doesn't have to be attached to anything. So far, I'm just going to go for orange, maybe a little bit of red with this reddy browny color. Okay, maybe something across, maybe stretch it again. My paint is quite runny. It's not gonna drip, but it could be quite runny. I could have some of the edges quite sharp, but I can also soften some of them. Does it need to be anywhere specific? No, I just want you to play with it, okay? And then I have a bit of stronger blue here at the bottom, so I think I'm going to put a little bit of blue here. Okay. Something runs into it, it runs into it. Maybe a tiny bit more lighter blue. And maybe some more of that brown again across. If you want to add anything else, maybe soften something here, maybe expand anything else. You can have your own mark making, it doesn't have to be all too precise as it is on a sample piece. And while the paint is still a little bit wet, we can get started drawing, or you can wait if parts of it, if it's all dry, that's okay as well. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to put my ink here, dip my stick in there, and I'm just going to try a few lines out, give myself maybe turn the wooden tool sideways. The ink stays in, so I don't have to dip into the bottle very often. It will create different darknesses though. So if I want something solid, I'll start dipping into the ink more frequently. If I want some lighter lines, I'll just keep the ink going. So all I'm going to do now, I'm going to roughly put a couple of lines. This is our sketch, this is our warm-up piece. It's not overly important, so I'm going to do a little bit of perspective. So I'll have a gentle oval, maybe on the top somewhere. Right, just a tiny bit more ink. Probably didn't lift it enough. Just a little bit free line. Okay, and another one. If it runs, it runs. Maybe somewhere here. Maybe this one. So the closer they get to the ground, they get less curly. If you didn't do it right, it doesn't matter. You can just go over it and just go and sketch it further back. And what's going to happen next? The lines on the right from those semi-ovals going to go a little bit more lower down. So you can just sketch with it, okay? Without maybe doing two perfect lines here. And the lines on the left is going to go a little bit more down there. And again, they get a tiny bit more flatter. Do we have to finish them all off? No. That gives us a rough idea of perspectives. So all I've done here is I'll just repeat that. So I'll just exaggerate it. It's more rounder at the top. It gets less round and flat. That's our perspective, okay? And then if I would have been looking down, I'll start having my lines going, curling further down, okay? But our house stops somewhere here, so we don't need anything below it. Okay. So if I were to do a little, like an angle for my house here, then I know that these lines are gonna start coming up somewhere here. I'll move this one away. They're roughly gonna come to my line down, and the same, these ones just gonna go. We don't have to know exactly where they're gonna go, but those are going to be, so that's what I've done with these lines. But again, this is a sketch. We don't have to do all the perfect shapes, and this is just a rough understanding for us. And then I'll start sketching tiny bit more details. And I love maybe playing with the lines at the top, so I can do a little shape, elongated shape with a triangular roof on the top. If you'll end up with your own design, that would be wonderful. You'll end up with your own architectural features. That'll be fabulous. It's very hard to know exactly what it is in there. You can see some sort of darkness in the windows. Maybe there's some more round features going on. And what's my aim will be is to start filling in some of the basic structural elements. For example, some of the rough direction of the windows, because it's perspective. It's going to be much easier for us for our actual painting. But it's the same principle, basic structure. Okay, roughly where the windows are. Do I have to do all the windows? No. As long as I know it's one below the other. Actually, on a drawing, they are slightly different. They're slightly moved up and at different angles. Okay, well, I've done mine now, so I'm going to keep them there. And then maybe some overall structure for the foreground, for these canopies for the shop entrances, maybe the doors. I can do a little line for the street, the pavement. Again, I don't have to do all the people there or tables. That's not too important. And then there is another big structure here, the window. Some sort of wibbly window. And it looks like the roof continues. If you're not too sure about your lines, if you're sketching, just keep using the same grayish tone for the lines. We can always add darker tones. It doesn't have to be runny. We can make it runny if we wanted to by just adding extra watercolors. But for the moment, to avoid a lot of mistakes, allowing ourselves to create mistakes or work within the shapes, establish where they're going to be. Just use slightly lighter ones or just slightly broken lines. And I'm going to establish a couple of more windows, maybe a bit smaller ones. Again, maybe one underneath another one. My window lines, the vertical lines will stay vertical. The horizontal line is going to follow these lines we've drawn here. That's the important part. Quite like that runniness of the ink initially done. If I want to do more of those later on, I can just introduce a little bit more extra watercolor and work with that. And I can decide how many windows or how very little number of windows I want to include. I made a mistake, I just redirected. Using the width of the of this wooden tool. I can press stronger and create a larger patterns of darkness. And I can slowly start working into different features. At your own speed, you can just play with it. If you need to fix anything, just add some extra lines. Or maybe start working into smaller windows here. Varying the line, the quality of the line, but from thinner one to a little bit more wider one. And really go with the flow. There are loads of light left, so I haven't painted all of the spaces there. That creates a really nice light within the city, maybe how the shadows were formed. Keeping it a bit more playful. If we keep our sharper details, we're in a central part of the building where that corner of the building is, then if there's anything else going wrong with our perspectives, it's light, it doesn't pay too much attention, and then it's easy on the eye. It's just very suggestive. Something there. Maybe a good autumn spring light. And then I can work into my key windows. Yeah, without making them perfect. Just gonna add some thinner lines around them. Maybe a little bit of some sort of architectural features by putting some little strokes. Trying to have playful lines. And then just taking your own speed, taking your own time, developing interesting, playful lines. If you want to add balconies, as we did in the past, if you want to add extra features because the ink smudged or because the line came out in an unusual way. I'm gonna do a balcony here. Mm-hmm. So all the focus is on that playfulness of the line, playfulness of the texture. I'll do a tiny bit of bricks on the wall. I've got quite a lot of empty spaces here. Again, I'm just following the lines, the direction of the lines of my major structural lines. So those bricks will have that overall direction there. Even as it is, the image already looking quite exciting. And it's a type of painting sketch. You can leave and stop at any time. And that's your observation, that's your recording. As if you were just there. I just add some extra features here on the building. Another window of some sort. I think I'd like to make my little rooftop here a tiny bit darker. And I'm working a bit more because I've established my major shapes, my major directions of the perspective. I can now work a little bit of texture on the brick wall, a little bit more on the windows. Have I finished these windows? Very possible. I'll just have to see how the rest of the piece goes before I add anything else to it. It's a lovely loose painting, drawing. I don't know if I want to do too much here. I quite like all that space here. So maybe I'll just do some key, maybe lines, but maybe not too much. Doesn't have to be a window that direction. I quite like it as it is for the moment. Or I might play a little bit more with them. Cafe entrance and some people maybe sitting there. There is a traffic lights here if you wanted to bring it and sketch it, but it's up to you. You might not want to. I think the traffic lights is a little bit darker shape to show its shadow. If you have a space for it, you can use it, but you don't have to. Gives it a bit more extra character. And there might be another one standing. Always see from it, it's just a darker, longer mark. Or it just disappears. Into your sketch. So this is just to help the work to develop, not to make it more complex. Yeah, just if you want it to be edited, then great. If not, it's not a problem. You don't have to introduce it. Just might make it just a little bit something busy on that corner. And where does it stop? One continues, one somewhere else. Depends on how many details I'll have here. I can decide what else I can add to my traffic lights. So it's a perfect wobbly sketch you can learn from. I'm gonna just draw something on the foreground. I think this might be, I don't know if it's a person or if it's a box, maybe like a newspaper little kiosk, but or maybe just a big shape of some sort of, I don't know what might be there on the street. People, just when you start drawing people, maybe a good idea just to put a wider line and a smaller head. Try not to make a big head and the same volume, kind of small body. That looks much more natural. Not because just the head is smaller, but because we presume the head might be bigger, but there might be loads of highlights on it. Don't have to do legs and arms. Just keep it as simplified shapes, maybe cluttered together or cluttered a bit more separately. Yeah, there might be something going on. So if I just do not every shape with a line next to it, it might give me an idea of a number of a group of people walking. Yeah. Just realized that some of my lines are a little bit under the angle, so it gives an impression of people are falling. Okay. And maybe at the back I'll do some more window sketches on what's behind them. Again, stay brave, stay free. See what marks you'll end up with. Nice and sketchy. Maybe a tiny bit more here. Give some vertical lines for the back. And I think my street view, maybe just put a few horizontal lines at the bottom here. Nice and playful sketch. It's done. If anything feels like falling, sometimes when we look at the work from a slightly different angle to how we sat, you can just add a few lines just to redirect that. I think that side was feeling a tiny bit more as it's falling. Now it's a bit better. So I'm just supporting myself with extra lines, and that's easily done within this technique. Putting maybe an extra window frame or just redirecting it all. I think I might do another window still here. So just looking at similar area for actual painting, getting in preparation for it. I'm gonna do use some brown. Some brown somewhere here. And some green. So by mixing it, I'll end up with some sort of umber type of color. I don't have to fill all the gaps, remember? There's one of my browns here. Maybe something like that. So there will be loads of light spaces, there will be loads of darks. This is just a runny colors of a couple of browns and green. And then I'll do the same just to practice maybe just to sketch some of the branches. Maybe to sketch part of the tree. I think that's a shadow actually. I don't think I need those lines. But I can sketch my tree while the paint is wet. So instead of adding very dark watercolor, I'll just use solid ink. If you don't have ink, I should have mentioned it earlier, you can just use black watercolor. Have some sort of runny. Okay, let me just lift this so I can see a bit better. So branches wise, I'm just trying to work into nice and easy lines, maybe flattering, getting the wedge. Sometimes you angle your tool one way or the other, and it just creates something new. So I'm just starting to use it. I quite like that. Just lovely strokes for some of the branches. And all I'm doing is I'm just using the tool and using, so the ink is concentrated on the top, the edge is clean. I think I just picked up tiny bit of color, ink, sorry. I'm just dragging it down, and yeah, those kind of long lines. That's all. And if I just make those lines tiny bit shorter, I'll start having slightly different angles of branches. If you want to have those branches longer or shorter, that would be quite a nice practice. But again, I'll practice things like that just before I start adding them to the actual painting. But let's give me an idea of what I'll be doing with some of my lines. Again, let me give you a couple of more minutes to play. So now we're going to look at our painting we're going to create with a cottage. Before we start painting nice and loose shapes of color, let's identify where the cottage is going to be, maybe the basic shape for the road, and how much of the sky we're going to have. That will allow us to be a bit more free with our line and ink. So my cottage, if I were to divide my picture into half, is more into the right-hand side. Maybe try not to put the actual line of the wall and the roof of the cottage in the center, maybe a little bit more towards the right. So again, that will help me if I were to divide my piece of paper into half, roughly somewhere here. So then my cottage will be more into the right hand side of it. And again, if I were to measure my cottage height, including the rooftop, it's probably going to be almost the same space, what's below it and what's above it. So it's like a rule of third again, roughly. I think I'm going to drop it a tiny bit lower on the bottom rather than the perfect rule of third, and leave maybe a tiny bit more of the sky. But that proportion of width, yeah, if I were to divide it, would have been more or less similar. It's not super long one. I've got some trees on the right hand side, so it's just enough shape of a box. Okay, if I'll make the lines tiny bit darker, you'll see them better. You can keep your lines nice and light. So if you need to rub them out, and they're not going to be interrupting with your watercolors later. Now the roof is overhanging the wall, and it appears to be the wall is slightly shorter than the roof. So the roof is bigger in size here than this section. Okay, and part on of the wall, I think, might be standing out, or something else happening there with another extension. So it looks like it's just a tiny bit overhanging. So I might remove that line. Something else going with the garden. I think there's a little extension or a bay window. So that's still staying something there, but that's not important. I just want to have a bit more dramatic shape there. What's important is the shape of our door. Now don't forget, we're going to have quite a wide shadow. If you want to draw a rough shape for the shadow, you can. That's only just to let you know how big the door is going to be. Okay, maybe about here. It's going to be my door. And my window, quite a wide window, consisting of 3 segments. Again, it's under the shadow, so we know that's where the position is. Quite low again, towards the ground. I might just shrink it at the top and extend it. I'm not doing any other details on the windows because I'll be working with the ink and pen. There is a little window on the roof. Nice big triangle over it. Can't see much else, it's just there. And then a beautiful feature is the chimney. Again, probably quite a wide one, so don't make it tiny. Compare the shapes of the windows and the door to each other, maybe to the chimney. Looks like there is another window coming behind the tree here. So these trees are just coming over it. But I think I'm going to leave it out. I don't know if I want to keep it there. So my cottage is almost ready. I'm now going to draw the road. So we have a little hill, kind of just something going up off the road. It just gives me a bit more of an entrance point in the composition. It doesn't take me away. So the road's going to come up almost parallel to the house, but I'm going to make it the line, not the perfect straight one, but I'm going to do a little curve to it. We have a shadow on the road. We'll do that with some color maybe. And then the wall, I'll draw a line where the green is going to be for them in front of the cottage, the lawn, and the wall and the soil part of the bank here is going to be the same. I'm not going to separate them. As also, I'm not going to be painting everything. I'm going to be painting a big chunks of things. What I can do maybe a tree coming up here. And I like the tree at the back. Okay, that comes up here. It's a big shape. Again, we will work with it with color, much more loose. Don't have to tell all the details. That shape is roughly somewhere there. If you decide that the tree, the two tall cypress trees, you're not quite happy with them, that they're there, you can just get rid of them. I just extend this tree across. I'll see how my piece goes. And then I'm going to look for this big block of the dark tree in front of us, because that's quite a key element. So I'm just going to draw it tiny bit above the house, well, probably just tiny bit or in line with the chimney height. And what type of shape? It's leaning towards the cottage. It actually has much more space here than behind it. So I'm drawing it as a big shape. And that will allow us to decide where we're going to put more color and where we're going to keep loads of blank spaces. And my hedge wall bank, whatever that shape is, it's going to be somewhere here. And that tree is going to merge with it all. So there isn't a specific line for it, but it's going to stay with my hair. So the light here is going to be protruding. There looks like there's another wall behind the tree. You can see a couple of poles of the fence at the back. And this fence continues somewhere here. I'll just do a few sticks. I really like the road sign here, but I don't like where it is in front of the house. So I think I'm going to move it further away. I'm going to move it, see here, probably in the corner. So then I can see the signs better. Big blocks. So if you decide to move it, that might be an extra feature for you. And then it will stay close to the same size as some of the part of the fence here. So for the signs, I've just done a couple of elongated boxes, and then the directing to the right and left, put a tiny bit of a triangle on the corners. There's another one that goes away, we can't quite see it. That might be my sign. And then maybe finally, I'll add an idea where some of the color might be changing for the trees at the back. So I'm just using some big lines to identify some of the shapes of the trees at the back. So then I've got this V shape for the sky left. So let's have a look at our picture here and decide where we're going to introduce color and where we're not. So for example, if I were to analyze my image altogether, I have a very dark block of the tree in front of the house and on the right hand side. So I probably will keep those colors, keep those areas not only dark, but also with color. I have a shadow on the road, so I might put some color there. It means that my road might stay blank. There are loads of light tones on the wall of the house and window on the roof. So maybe the roof overall might have some color, but maybe part of it is going to be without. Same with the sky. Maybe part of the lower part of the sky coming close to the horizon will be, maybe I'm not going to paint it, but maybe part of it's going to have some color on the top. And then the rest we'll just see how we go. Let's say if I'm painting the grass here, maybe part of it will stay blank. We'll just have to see what's been left out and what stays blank on the house. Now this side here, large side of the trees here on the left-hand side from the house, it's all dark. It's a loads of browns. We don't have to make it all dark, okay? We're going to do a little bit at a time. We can always add some more, but we're going to try maybe not to be too bombarding it too much. And my suggestion is going to be for you to take a very big brush. That is because I don't want you to get lost in the details, okay? So I'm going to put the photograph aside for a moment so we can get started on the painting. So with a big brush, I'm going to start on the house. So I like the idea of seeing some orange within my roof, so I can exaggerate some of the colors. So it's going to be a stylized painting. So I have some orange and maybe a tiny bit of one of the browns, similar to what we just done on our sketch of the building, because that's going to be the highlight of the whole piece. So I'll have a big block of maybe a tiny bit darker, otherwise it will dry very light. Just a bit more concentrated paint. Okay. Some big block of it here. Don't want to make it too perfect. So maybe something like that there. Maybe a tiny bit of red. I fancy adding a little bit of red here. Tiny bit of red. On the side, so the color just gently changing. I'm going to leave it as it is. If I want to help myself with very many sharp lines, I can use a spare brush to maybe soften some of them. So I deliberately left part of the roof here quite dark. Sorry, quite dark, quite unfinished. Okay. And then, well, I've got this color. I think I'm gonna go for a similar color, a little bit lower, where the bank is. Banking, a little bit of a banking, tiny bit more here. Maybe somewhere on the side here. Okay. Continues, but then maybe breaks down. Maybe a tiny bit of browny green here, a little bit of color here and there, basically. Okay. And going to have a shadow there, so that's okay. Can leave that one there. So some of my big chunks of color. Working with a big brush allows you to do very quick coverage of the surface without too much thinking, okay? And that's the point of the whole exercise, to do something quite quick, quite straightforward. and we see the shapes very differently as well with the big brush. I'm going to use a similar, one of those similar browns and oranges, and I'll add that color, I think, to some of the background trees. Maybe somewhere here. I'll just put a few strokes. Few big strokes. Let them run. And then I'll start adding some darker green. So I'm going to use a darker green with my existing colors. I can use a bit of brown, a bit more stronger brown, but one of them maybe sap green or dark green, maybe not emerald green. If you have emerald green, maybe add extra brown, extra orange in it. So then the quality of the color stays much more close to those orangey colors. So that's going to be my tree. I'm not going to paint it all. I'm going to leave some whites in there. So I'm just dragging the brush a little bit more here without painting perfect shapes. And I'm going to stop. I'm going to do a tiny bit of work with ink in the moment while the paint is still wet. Now I'm going to start adding my ink. And I'll start adding my ink for the tree here. Possibly adding some of those tree trunks, lines. Using I'll start using the wedge, the widths of the tree, of the wooden wedge here. That will give you some nice marks. If you're not sure if your tool picks up too much ink, try it on a spare piece of paper and just test it out, so it's not going to be some solid black lines too quickly. Yeah, we can add solid black, but sometimes they might be too disruptive on a very wet surface. So for example, I can put some more stronger blacks on more of a drier surface because they will be more in control. Those softer ones are lovely when the surface is quite gently damp. And it's imitation of the foliage or of the branches. You don't have to tell all the story. Some of these marks create extra shadows and light effects. If something you want to highlight in dark, maybe don't rush doing it too quickly. We can always do it afterwards. I quite like that shape. Okay. And then I might do similar things for some of the branches coming this way as we practice some of those low strokes. Maybe draw some darker lines once I know, once I like some of those experimental marks. I haven't done the sky yet, so I'm not going to go too far into the sky. It's like some, I think there's a nice tree trunk coming up somewhere here. That's could create a good shadow for this corner. Again, the branches are hanging down. If you end up with different directions for the branches, it's fine because there are loads of shadows there. And there are loads of might be different trees, how they overlap. Those branches. Okay, that's might be my tree trunk there. Right at the back. Just need to be careful so some of my lines not going to be too regular parallel to each other. That's, those ones will go behind my key tree. So I need to make sure they'll stop a bit more abruptly as they're stopping behind. And there are loads of some sort of lines, more cluttered lines, getting to the bottom of the painting. So I'll just do loads of lines, dry, big, narrow. Maybe give you time to play with it again. Right, now we start putting some of the ideas what we want to do with the branches here. I'm going to start adding a tiny bit more color. With the same big brush, I'm gonna add some fresher blue. Just need to make sure I wash my brush well. Okay, it's not quite washed it well. And gonna pick up azure or ultramarine, any of the color, because we're going to have just a big shape of it. And I will leave some of it white, some of the sky white. Part of my ink is still wet here, so I might want to postpone putting some blue that direction. Okay. Lift some of that darkness and maybe just gently brush it if it runs. It runs. But also I want to have a tiny bit of darkness of that blue. Okay. That darkness, so it's not much color, it's mainly tone, what's a tiny bit lighter, how it's distributing. Okay, it's running quite a lot. So or I can lift it or I can just flatten my board and keep it soft. Right, I don't know if I like the idea of it settling on a branch. I want to just gently go in here. So just go with the flow. It might not come out exactly how I've done it. Okay. And I'll do a tiny bit of fresh color for the green lawn. So my light green, yellowish green with some extra yellow in it. You can go for emerald green and yellow, just making it quite happy green color. And I'll just paint a big chunk of it right in front of the cottage here. Maybe a little bit more stronger yellow. Okay. Don't forget that we don't have to paint everything. We can leave some whites. Where the shapes overlap, I'm just going to make sure that the runs are not big, so we have nice and soft color. distribution. And the same light green, I think I'm going to put in a nice corner on the left-hand side, which overlaps the road. Make a tiny bit more bolder color there. And while we're on this work, on this corner, sorry, I think I'm going to make
Julia.
a shadow. Yes. Yes, Cyril, you okay? Bottom right corner. I'm going to use my big brush. I think it's still filled with green, so I don't have to wash it. I'm just in some sort of grayish purpley color, so just going to add a tiny bit of that purple, maybe even blue, as a big color across. Maybe just playful in its pattern here. Okay, this goes over the masking tape here as well, so it's not going to dry unpleasantly. Okay, take some of that away. Let the paint settle, just run down. I want it settling in droplets. Okay. And I can use the same color, maybe a tiny bit more under the rooftop of our house. It will stay slightly darker. We can use the inks for it afterwards as well, but I think that will give it a good impression. It's reflecting, so that. And same for the chimney. You can just make it blue, violet, whatever color you had on the brush with it, so it just looks a bit of a mucky color, mucky purpley blob. Doesn't have to be perfect. If the marks ended up going out of the shape, it's okay. Just making it a tiny bit darker here. And then I'm ready to do another shadow. Same colors. I'm going to do another shadow next to my small patch of green on the left bottom corner. We have a shadow right behind it, so all I'll do, I'll just do a big stroke over my browny area and some of the colors at the back. Just set it off. Okay. And I quite like this color, so I'm going to add a little bit more of that color going over some of my branches on the left hand side. I want to keep quite a bit of white left, so maybe like that for the moment. Try not to overwork it. To offset the cottage and the tree with a big gap here, I'd keep the cottage white, but I'll go for more of that purpley again color and just offset the shape next to the cottage. It's quite a pale color, but there's still quite a few little white gaps. Just creates a nice shadow next to the cottage. So if we do have quite a lot of whites on it left with some black lines, it's predominantly, and it's separating it from the background. That bit darker here. Quite like some of the shadows. We'll let those colors dry and work slightly more on the right hand side behind the cottage, the big shapes of the green tree. Again, the green tree will be made from one of the darker greens, like a sap green. Don't have a sap green, emerald green with some orange or with a little bit of red. I'm going to add some orange to it as well. And with big strokes, a couple of blobs of green, leaving quite a lot of white. Don't have to paint it all the way to the roof. Just going to collect a tiny bit of water here. And then I have nice big shapes of green for the tree next to it. That's could be a little bit more solid green. I want to put a bit of blue with it. But again, that's very experimental. The whole piece could have been done in brownie colors. It doesn't have to be doing too much exploration of it in color. More interested in what's going to stay white, what's going to stay painted in color. Now coming close to the sign for me here, I'm going to leave my shapes of the signs, of the direction signs, white on one side, so I can paint around them. If you need a smaller brush for it, you can use a smaller brush. Okay, it's reflecting more clear again. And then I think at the top, I'll have a tiny bit of warmth, a bit of orangey color mixed with some of this green. I want the top sign maybe covered in a little bit paler orangey color. It's okay if all the green is gonna go over some of the signage, but I think what I'm doing here is trying to keep the at least two directions of the sign, one on the left, one on the right, outlined, almost outlined with green. Top one stayed hidden with a little bit of lighter color, so it's not too foreign there. We'll see how this green dries as well. So color wise, I think I'm finished with the watercolor, at least at this stage. I can add maybe some more green, tiny bit more green on the left hand side, just to balance amount of green. It's small. But might give that balance between the cottage tiny bit here. Try not to overdo it. Hopefully the rest will be just ink work. If we need to add more watercolors, we can do it. But for the moment, that looks enough. And let's add some ink to the cottage and maybe to the trees on the right hand side. So I'll start with the cottage. Just check your ink. Depends where you want to start with. I think I'm going to start from my shadow under the roof. If I want the line a little bit darker. And make that line a bit more creative. It doesn't have to be solid black. Broken view for it. If something is still running, maybe I'll persuade it then, because that effect started to happen there. I'll encourage it so it doesn't look like it's been done by accident. It looks like I needed that. I've created a nice shadow because of it. And I just wanted to shadow a corner of the house to be sharpened, but that's all part of it, part of the technique. Let's do a line above. Let's build up the chimney. Nice triangle roof over them. Window on the rooftop. I'll press more on the windows to create that depth. A bit more broken line. More shadow. Yeah, I'll just do a little bit at a time, and I know, okay, I need to highlight something, or maybe I just need to put an extra line on. Okay, that's quite nice. I can use the edge of my tool just to create some horizontal lines, maybe to show some of the tiles. If you want a bit more tension, we can enlarge the darkness of the roof. Maybe some of the tiles could be slightly darker here then. Just be careful not to put too many. Keep kind of stepping away and looking, balancing the amount of horizontal lines with vertical lines. Quite like that nice dark mark I ended up with. Maybe I can put another dark one somewhere here to balance out. And some more work for the windows. Something dark underneath. And then the window frames, I can outline in very thin lines. I could just leave them even blank. I don't have to draw them all perfectly. A darker shadow under the window. Your hand wobbles, creates your mark. Enjoy it. Don't be scared of it. Maybe some brickwork, stonework will come up later on when my wooden wedge is not so wet. And do a shadow over the door. Drag this one here, maybe do some textures of the wooden door here. And stay creative. Don't worry too much about unexpected marks. Add something to unexpected marks to make them work. For example, I can add some more, maybe tops of the plants here next to the house. I'm now interested in maybe doing some fence, the fence poles. Okay, just need to make sure I'm doing my stick carefully so the poles are staying where I want them to stay. This one nice and dark. Did I want it to happen dark? No. Did it happen? Can I keep it? Yep. I might just balance the other ones by putting a little bit of extra darkness in some of them. Maybe put another thinner one next to it. And here is my direction sign. I might even put some writing in there, maybe some big letters of unreadable style. Okay, bit of writing there. Any other vertical lines for them? They're slightly not quite perfectly vertical, they're under slightly different angles because I don't want to have a perfectly new fence there. Perfectly new shapes. And I think there's some more there. A couple of under the tree here, which are much lighter in tone. Because I've missed the opportunity to make them lighter, I'm just going to make them darker. There was some fence. So right at the back. I think there is barbed wire, some sort of net for them between the poles. We can do that with thinner lines, or if you end up with wider lines, it's okay. Sometimes that type of fence can have much more wider pieces of wood going between them, so it will be just adding character. I'm going to try not to keep those lines super parallel to each other. I want again to create that dynamics of reflecting light and also dynamics of how the spaces where the shape, you know, what the bank is, how it's turning. Is it close to us? Is it more further away? Maybe there is a gate. Maybe there isn't a gate. And I like the idea of doing maybe part of the wall on the bottom, just drawing some stones. Over some white and painted surfaces. So we have part of it as just a bank, and part of it maybe a stone wall, very low one, disappearing in the shadow. under the tree. I just keep using the same inky darkness. So then the dark lines don't jump. But here I think I need a tiny bit of darkness. Maybe at the bottom part of the wall to create a little shadow. Then the pole here is not on its own and it's dark shape. And this wall might stop and then have another beginning of it. Maybe just a highlight, that's why we can't see. Maybe some more stones close to the road here. Anything else need to be done by the house? Just gonna sharpen the line. Maybe have some sort of indication of a path there, or some shadow next to the house. Well, that's quite a nice texture on the house. I done it by accident because I had a wet smudge there, a wet area. So I'll keep it on the house and I'll just soften it on the background, just with a brush. That black will run into the damp layer here. And then I spotted a nice shadow again here next to the green little bank at the front on the left bottom corner. So I'll do a big scratch of darkness across and then use my brush to drag that ink out. Some shadows. That's nice depths. By dragging some ink and then putting a bit of watercolor on the brush, or just water. That tells me that I can make maybe this corner still a tiny bit darker. Everybody's piece will be more individual of how to develop it. Have a play what feels right for you. And a tiny bit of playfulness for the road. Maybe the edge of the road might have something. The shadow. I think I've made a few marks on the shadow by accident, and they're vertical marks because I was doing the fence here. So to make that improvement on the shadow, put another line here. I'm going to create a few lines, maybe going more horizontal. So takes attention. It's got the diagonal, but it takes attention of some of my vertical mistakes, vertical lines, mark making mistakes. Also makes the shadow slightly darker. Maybe even adding a tiny bit of water over this runny ink. It's not quite runny because it's almost dry. I think I can drag and increase a tiny bit of darkness of that shadow as well. And then coming back to some of the trees at the behind the cottage. So I'll do some branches now behind on the trees behind the cottage. The cottage and the foreground at the moment, kind of all this area and a bit more here, staying more stronger in lines. There are some darker lines on this corner for me, but your dynamics of the line and darkness might be different. So as long as it's a little bit more distributed between various sections and balancing it out, don't want to have one corner dark and the rest is light. So for me here, I need to keep my lines slightly paler, maybe, or maybe not as taking as much attention. So it doesn't mean they can't be black, but maybe semi-dry like these. Let's know what that lovely top of my tool creates a beautiful cypress tree textures. I might play on that feature. As my advantage. And then tiny bit more branches. More, not even branches, more volumes of those shapes. So I'm using a little bit of damp ink on the side to help myself stretch it. Maybe with a line or with a little width. I wanted to put some branches. I can do some branches there as well. The dark lines stay very much precise ones. So that's why I'm trying not to draw a classic branch like the children will draw with lines going left and right from the center one line. I'm trying to do it slightly more. Okay, I've got some dark tone here. If I ended up too much black, I can use my watercolor brush and just take some of that ink off. All of the ink will not go, but it will take some of the solidness of it. Actually, it has gone. I've done it quick enough. And it's also softened that canopy of the tree. I think next to the cottage, I might put some darker tone as well. Right. I'm just looking at all of it in this area around my signs. I think I could do with the green coming close to my signs. There was an odd shape developing. Right, that's quite nice. Maybe a tiny bit more texture on the cottage itself, maybe some stones. Drawn, but nice narrow lines might be better. Very narrative type of approach. And again, stepping back from the painting, I can see I can do maybe some more stones on the foreground here. Making the wall maybe a little bit heavier. The bank maybe will come up. Yeah, that's given a nice depth to it. Just checking anything else can be done. Maybe a small amount of branches here. Like that. Maybe another branch. It's a tiny bit smaller. Textured lines. I might add a couple of people in the distance there. Maybe in the garden, maybe. Maybe it's part of, doesn't have to be people, there might be just something which somebody might read as part of the garden or part of the depths, and some figures. I think I'm going to add a little bit of a wall, and just looking at the work itself, I think that would be a nice addition to add some sort of wall shape. So have a look at your piece. You might want to add something I haven't done, or maybe something you don't need to add. don't feel that you have to bring it to your painting. I think my last few touches are going to be on the rooftop. I like the color to be a tiny bit stronger, so I'll use some orange and some red for stroke, and we'll finish my painting on that. Let's be nice, bolder color. And that's it.